In the sprawling suburbs of Cedar Grove, Illinois, Lincoln High School stood as an aging monument to small-town normalcy. Its brick exterior faded, its halls lined with lockers dented by decades of restless hands. The community took pride in its school, especially in its long-serving faculty, many of whom had taught multiple generations. One such teacher was Mr. Daniel Whitmer, 56, the beloved AP English instructor, known for his dry wit, love of literature, and the ritual of assigning each student a personal reading list tailored to their future self. His room, 207, was a sanctuary of books and quiet thought, lit by soft lamps and smelling faintly of old paper and coffee. But in May 2011, days before final exams, Whitmer vanished, his classroom locked from the inside, his car still in the lot, and no trace of him anywhere. What began as a missing persons case quickly became a town mystery, until a group of his own students refused to accept official silence and uncovered a secret hidden within the school walls, a truth that would haunt Lincoln High forever. NTHE disappearance was first noticed by students arriving for class. Whitmer was never late, but on that Monday morning, room 207's door was locked, the lights off. The janitor claimed the room had been cleaned late Sunday evening, and nothing was amiss. The principal dismissed concerns, suggesting Whitmer was ill. But when his apartment showed no sign of entry, his phone was found on his desk, and security footage revealed no exit from the school after 6 p.m. Sunday. Students grew uneasy. Then came the anonymous texts. Several seniors received messages from an unknown number. "He's still here. Find the passage." At first dismissed as a prank, the texts grew specific, naming books on the classroom shelves, referencing inside jokes only Whitmer and his students would know. One message read, "The bell tolls, but no one leaves. Look under the floor." And 3 students, Leah Nguyen, Marco Tisdale, and Eric Holloway, took it upon themselves to investigate. They broke into room 207 after hours. The door was locked, but not from inside. The lock had been tampered with, set to latch unnaturally. Inside, the room was undisturbed, save for a single book on Whitmer's desk, The Fall of the House of Usher, open to a passage about entombment. On a hunch, the students lifted the old wooden floorboards beneath the teacher's desk. Beneath layers of dust and insulation, they found a metal latch, a trapdoor to a maintenance crawlspace that had long been forgotten. What they found inside changed everything. Whitmer's body was there, positioned upright, eyes open, a look of frozen terror on his face. His hands were bound, his mouth sealed with cloth, and scrawled in red marker across the walls were the words, "He graded too harshly." Police were called immediately. The investigation that followed revealed that Whitmer had been lured to the classroom Sunday evening, likely by someone he trusted. The crawlspace showed signs of a struggle, but no DNA. The key evidence came from a hidden camera Whitmer had installed after a prior break-in. The footage revealed the killer, Paul Jeffries, a janitor and former student who had failed Whitmer's class years prior, leading to expulsion and later unemployment. He had blamed Whitmer for his ruined life, and over time became obsessed, eventually getting hired back under a false name. Confronted with the evidence, Jeffries confessed. He had orchestrated the scene as poetic justice, believing Whitmer's own love of Gothic horror warranted an authentic end. His plan had included the texts, sent via Whitmer's own phone, as a twisted test for the students, believing they would fail to find him in time. But they hadn't. They found him. And they remembered. Lincoln High was closed for the remainder of the year. Room 207 remained sealed. A plaque outside bears Whitmer's favorite quote: "The truth is rarely pure and never simple." His students know better than anyone how true that is, and how dangerous a story can become when it's twisted into reality. In the misty countryside of Cornwall, England, perched on a windswept hill and surrounded by tangled woods, sat Dalton Academy, a centuries-old boarding school where tradition ran deep and secrets even deeper. Known for its Gothic stone architecture, strict code of conduct, and an alumni list that included politicians, scientists, and aristocrats, Dalton operated like a world unto itself, isolated, prestigious, and unwelcoming to outsiders. The students, mostly from wealthy families, were accustomed to the school's silent halls, long-standing rumors, and the cold distance of the faculty. But in the spring term of 1997, the routine was shattered when Dr. Thomas Harrow, the school's brilliant but eccentric biology teacher, failed to appear for morning roll call. At first, staff said he was ill. Days passed, then weeks. No one saw him. No official explanation came. But behind the facade of normalcy, a group of students sensed something was deeply wrong, and what they uncovered led to the school's first police raid in its 200-year history, and exposed a faculty conspiracy buried beneath layers of tradition, fear, and silence. NDR. Harrow had always been an enigma. He wore the same 3 suits on rotation, spoke in clipped sentences, and spent most of his free time in the greenhouse annex, a dilapidated wing of the school reserved for biology labs and plant studies. Students joked about his obsession with experiments, his habit of talking to specimens, and his weekly orders of exotic flora. But he was brilliant. His classes were immersive, and his knowledge unrivaled. One student, James Pennington, a quiet but curious sixth former, had become Harrow's assistant, staying late for lab prep and sharing a love of entomology. When Harrow failed to appear one morning, James was confused, and then concerned when he noticed the greenhouse doors chained shut, the lights left on inside, and a strange odor wafting through the cracks. When James inquired, he was told the greenhouse was under maintenance. Days later, he received a letter, supposedly from Harrow, stating that he had taken a sabbatical due to exhaustion. The signature was off, the writing was stiff, and Harrow had once confided that he'd never leave midterm, especially not before the annual scientific exhibition, which he had been preparing for obsessively. Driven by suspicion, James began his own investigation. Late one night, he and 2 friends, Clara Whitby and Omar Qureshi, snuck into the greenhouse annex through a window left ajar. Inside, they found Harrow's personal effects untouched: lab coat, briefcase, notes on the upcoming exhibition. But in the far corner, beneath a tarp, was something worse. Bloodstains, broken glass, and what appeared to be a human tooth, half buried in soil. Terrified, they alerted the local constable, who, upon seeing the evidence, secured a search warrant. What followed shocked the town and country. In the sub-basement of the greenhouse, police discovered a hidden room accessible through a false wall. Inside were cages, vivisection tools, and a locked freezer. Inside the freezer, Dr. Harrow's body, mutilated, his hands severed, and his eyes removed. Medical examiners concluded he had been dead for weeks. The cause? Poison and blunt trauma. But the horror didn't end there. NTHE investigation revealed that 3 senior faculty members, including the headmaster, had discovered that Harrow was preparing to expose illegal human experimentation being conducted under the guise of plant research. Harrow had found evidence that the school's botany program, funded by a private pharmaceutical firm, was experimenting on runaway children trafficked through scholarship programs. When Harrow threatened to go public, they silenced him and staged his disappearance. The school had quietly facilitated these activities for over a decade, protected by wealth, reputation, and secrecy. And James, Clara, and Omar's actions led to multiple arrests, the dissolution of Dalton's Board of Governors, and the permanent closure of the greenhouse annex. The school continued to operate, but with new oversight. A memorial plaque to Harrow was erected, but defaced within a year, the truth too painful, too shameful. Today, alumni refuse to speak of 1997. But students say that on quiet nights, near the old greenhouse, you can hear the hum of Harrow's projector flicker to life, and his voice, faint but unmistakable, saying, "Science must serve truth, or it serves monsters." In the bustling outskirts of Guadalajara, Mexico, where concrete sprawls in every direction and the hum of city life never stops, El Monte High School was just another public institution, forgotten by the government, underfunded, and overwhelmed. Its classrooms were overcrowded, its windows cracked, and its staff stretched thin. Yet for many students, it was a second home, and for some, a last chance. Señorita Angela Reyes, the school's only full-time math teacher, was a beacon of hope amid chaos. In her early 30s, strict but compassionate, Reyes believed in her students and worked tirelessly to help them succeed, even if it meant buying supplies from her own pocket or staying late to tutor struggling kids. In May 2005, her body was found stabbed to death in her classroom, and the school, police, and media quickly blamed Juan Ortega, the elderly janitor. But the students who knew her best didn't believe it, and what they uncovered revealed a far more sinister truth that the authorities tried to bury. NTHE crime scene was brutal. Reyes was found slumped over her desk, a blood-soaked ruler in one hand, a student's failing exam in the other. There were signs of a struggle: overturned chairs, smashed chalkboard, and bloody footprints leading toward the hallway. Juan Ortega was arrested within hours. A knife was found in his maintenance closet, stained with blood. His uniform had splatters. The case seemed open and shut. The media painted him as a bitter old man, resentful after being reprimanded by Reyes for neglecting his duties. The school moved on quickly, but 4 students, Diego, Marisol, Lena, and Luis couldn't let it go. Ortega had always been kind to them, often sneaking them food, helping fix broken chairs, or letting them stay late to study. None could imagine him committing such a crime. Determined to clear his name, they began reconstructing Reyes's final day, interviewing classmates, mapping her schedule. They discovered that Reyes had recently failed Hugo Salazar, the son of a local politician known for his temper and influence. Rumors swirled that Hugo had threatened her, claiming she would regret it. They also found a missing security tape. The hallway camera outside Reyes's classroom had been deactivated the night of the murder. Why? They confronted Principal Ramos, who dismissed them harshly. Undeterred, they broke into the school's security office one night, searching for backup recordings. What they found was chilling. A hidden folder on the system's hard drive labeled Admin Only. Inside, partial footage showed Hugo entering Reyes's classroom after hours, carrying a sports bag. The next morning, Ortega arrived and discovered the body, calling the police immediately. Yet this footage had been deleted and replaced. Clearly to frame Ortega, NTHE students leaked the video anonymously. It went viral across Mexico. Under public pressure, police reopened the case. Hugo was arrested, and Principal Ramos resigned in disgrace. It was revealed that Hugo's father had bribed school officials to protect his son. Reyes had been pressured to change his grade, but refused. Her death was a targeted revenge, and Ortega had been a convenient scapegoat. Ortega was released, but never returned to the school. He vanished from public life, unable to face the betrayal. El Monte High now bears a mural of Reyes, painted by Diego and Marisol, with the words, "Truth is learned not in silence, but in struggle." The students who stood for her are scattered now. Some became teachers, others activists. But they never forget the day justice rang the final bell. In the quiet coastal town of Shizuoka, Japan, nestled between the sea and the shadow of Mount Fuji, Sakura Middle School had long been considered a place of peace, discipline, and academic excellence. The corridors were silent, save for the click of shoes on polished floors, the classrooms filled with tidy rows of uniformed students. It was a place where order reigned and where secrets were buried beneath politeness and fear. Mr. Hiroshi Watanabe, a 41-year-old literature teacher, was known for his calm demeanor, traditional values, and passion for classic haiku. He was admired by colleagues, respected by students, and considered the moral center of the faculty. So when he was found hanging from the ceiling of classroom 2B one chilly October morning in 2013, it shattered the school's tranquility and the community's heart. A note was found beside him, a handwritten apology for his, quote, failures as a teacher. Police called it a suicide born of stress. The case was closed. But 3 of his students refused to believe that Mr. Watanabe had taken his own life, and their investigation would uncover a hidden predator, a trail of abuse, and a system built to silence victims. Watanabe's death was ruled a suicide within hours. The note, written in perfect calligraphy, admitted to being overwhelmed with shame and made vague references to, quote, harming the honor of the school. But Mai Takeda, a 14-year-old in Watanabe's homeroom class, found something off about the letter. Watanabe had once told her that writing was truth, and yet the letter's language felt forced, unlike his usual style. Alongside two friends, Sota Mizuno and Rika Fujiwara, Mai began asking questions. They learned that Watanabe had recently reported a senior staff member, Vice Principal Kenji Mori, for misconduct, though the details were unknown. A week later, Watanabe was dead, and Mai remembered Watanabe's leather-bound poetry journal, always on his desk, never far from reach. After his death, it was missing. Rumor had it that Mori had taken it for safekeeping. The students broke into the teacher's lounge and found it, hidden in a locked drawer. Inside the journal were not poems, but names. A list of female students, dates, and cryptic notes. One entry read, "She cried today. I reported it. They told me to forget." Another, "KM watches from the hallway window. They showed the journal to Mai's older brother, a university student and activist. Together, they uncovered a dark truth. Vice Principal Mori had a history of misconduct, with prior accusations of sexual harassment at a different school, all buried by the Education Board. Watanabe had discovered Mori's latest victim, a first-year student, and had reported it to the principal and local board, only to be threatened with dismissal for defaming a superior. Days later, he was dead. An autopsy revealed bruising inconsistent with suicide, but the school had refused a deeper investigation. The students, with their brother's help, leaked the journal pages online. The story exploded in the media. Under public pressure, police reopened the case. Mori was arrested, and several administrators were fired for cover-up and obstruction of justice. The truth was undeniable. Watanabe had been murdered, his death staged, his honor stolen. Today, a cherry tree grows outside classroom 2B, planted by the students who refused to forget. A plaque reads, "He wrote truth. We read it. Now the world knows." In the deep woods of West Virginia, far from city lights and far deeper in shadow than the surrounding mountains, sat Pine Hollow School, a forgotten relic of the 1950s, with peeling paint, rusted lockers, and a staff who taught out of obligation rather than inspiration. It was the kind of place where time stood still, where students counted the days to graduation not out of anticipation but desperation. Among them, only a few teachers stood out, and Miss Evelyn Carter, a 29-year-old history teacher, was one of them. New to town, lively, and passionate, she was everything the school was not. Hopeful, modern, and driven to help her students escape Pine Hollow's decay. But in October of 1992, her classroom went up in flames, consuming everything, including, it was assumed, her body. The local authorities labeled it an accidental electrical fire, tragic but routine. Yet one student, Sammy Colton, didn't believe it, and what he uncovered pointed to murder, a decades-old feud, and a killer hiding in plain sight. NTHE fire broke out during the weekend, with no one inside the building. By the time firefighters arrived, the East Wing, including Miss Carter's room, was engulfed. After 2 hours, the blaze was under control, but the damage was total. Investigators found charred remains near Carter's desk, and dental records confirmed the presence of her teeth. The school mourned. The case closed. But Sammy, 16, had been in detention the Friday before, forced to stay late and clean Miss Carter's classroom as punishment for talking back. While cleaning, he noticed her desk drawer was jammed shut, and Carter, distracted, had told him, "Remind me Monday. I'll show you something strange I found." That Monday never came. NTHE fire itself seemed odd. The building had no electricity that weekend, and yet the circuit breakers showed an overload at 2:13 a.m. Sammy told his father, a retired electrician, who said that kind of surge could only be deliberate. Sammy snuck into the school's storage basement, untouched by the fire, and found an old blueprint. Behind Carter's classroom wall had once been a janitor's closet, sealed off during renovations. Curious, Sammy investigated. Digging near the foundation, he found a scorched metal box. Inside, half-melted remains of papers, a school yearbook from 1974, and a rusted revolver. One paper had a name partially intact, D. Redford. Sammy took the items to local reporter Nancy Beale, who investigated the name and uncovered a long-forgotten murder case. In 1974, a student named Deborah Redford vanished. Her teacher, William Griggs, was suspected but never charged. The school covered it up. Griggs resigned and disappeared. Comparing staff records, Beale discovered something chilling. The current janitor, Mr. William Gage, was William Griggs with a new identity. Fingerprints from the gun matched his. Under pressure, police re-examined the fire and found accelerant traces. Griggs, confronted, confessed. Miss Carter had found Deborah's old file while cleaning out storage. She confronted him, and he killed her, burning the room to destroy evidence. Griggs died in prison in 1994. Pine Hollow School closed the same year, condemned. Today, its ruins stand beneath vines and silence. Sammy's clue, that jammed drawer, had solved not one murder, but two, and brought truth to a town that tried to forget. In the woods, beside the wreckage, someone placed a plaque. History cannot burn forever. In the heart of Strasbourg, France, where cobbled streets wind through medieval buildings and the echo of cathedral bells drifts over the rooftops, stood the Montclair Conservatory of Music, a prestigious and cloistered institution where only the most gifted were accepted, and where the arts were revered with near religious intensity. The conservatory's centerpiece was its ancient performance hall, its velvet curtains, stained glass windows, and warped wooden stage unchanged since the 1800s. Among its instructors, none were more admired than Professor Julien Duval, a 48-year-old violinist turned music theory teacher, known for his precise ear, gentle demeanor, and his belief that music reveals the soul's secrets. His advanced composition students adored him, and his classes were full each term. But on the eve of the conservatory's winter gala in 2017, Duval entered the hall for rehearsal and never came out. His disappearance became a local scandal, But as police searched in vain, it was his students who followed the music to the truth, a discovery that unearthed Duval's secret identity, a stolen past, an vengeful murderer who used the conservatory's very walls to hide a crime. Now, on the night of December 5th, Duval was leading a rehearsal for the gala's centerpiece, a difficult, original composition titled Requiem for Silence. The piece had dark undertones, filled with dissonance and abrupt pauses, unlike his usual style. He dismissed the students at 9 p.m. but lingered in the hall. Security footage showed him entering through the side stage door. He was never seen again. His coat and violin case remained backstage. His car was untouched. Police suggested he had left voluntarily, perhaps overwhelmed by pressure. But his students didn't believe it, particularly Isabelle Mercier, a 20-year-old composition prodigy who had become close with Duval. She remembered that in recent weeks he had been anxious, often looking over his shoulder, and once told her, not all music should be played aloud. 2 days after his disappearance, the students were given access to their teacher's classroom to collect personal items. Isabelle found Duval's notebook on his desk, open to a passage of the Requiem score. On the margin he had written, "The gallery whispers, the stage remembers." Isabelle knew the hall's upper gallery was rarely used, closed for safety reasons. With fellow student Marc Dubois, she climbed the creaking stairs that night. There, in the dust, they found footprints, a scratched music stand, and something more chilling, a blood-stained handkerchief embroidered with Duval's initials. They called police, who then searched the gallery's wall panels. One panel opened to reveal a narrow servants' corridor, sealed since World War II. In that corridor, behind a false wall, police found Duval's body, strangled, posed upright with a sheet of music clutched in his hand. The sheet was not the Requiem. It was a different score, with a name scrawled at the top. Jean-Luc Moreau, a name that meant nothing to the students, until Isabelle uncovered a decades-old legal file hidden in the library archives. Julien Duval was not his real name. He had once been Jean-Luc Moreau, a child prodigy at Montclair in the 1980s, accused of plagiarizing a composition that led to a fellow student's suicide. He changed his name, vanished from the public eye, and returned to Montclair under a new identity. Someone had discovered the truth and killed him for it. NTHE killer was found to be Etienne Langlois, the older brother of the dead student from 1986, who had become Montclair's head of maintenance, unseen, background, forgotten. He confessed that when he discovered Duval's identity through school records, he plotted revenge, lured Duval to the gallery with a forged letter, and killed him, hiding him where he once had watched his brother's final performance. NTHE Conservatory canceled the gala. Duval's Requiem was never performed, but Isabelle took his score, and 1 year later performed it alone in the same hall, a tribute to a man who tried to escape his past and was consumed by it. In the gleaming outskirts of Busan, South Korea, where modern glass towers meet narrow alleyways filled with old street vendors and flickering neon signs, sat Dongjin High School, a private academic powerhouse known for its brutal entrance exams, long study hours, and relentless pressure to succeed. For years, Dongjin had sent more students to Seoul National University than any other school in the province, and parents paid heavily in tuition, in bribes, in stress, for a chance to enroll their children. At the heart of Dongjin's academic machine was Mr. Park Hyun-soo, a 39-year-old mathematics teacher, quiet, precise, and known for producing perfect test scores. His students called him the Machine, but behind the nickname lay respect. Park was not cruel, just obsessively focused, and some believed he would one day become principal. That dream ended in March 2010, when Park was found dead at his desk, a pencil stabbed into his neck, the classroom door locked from the inside. What was first believed to be a grisly suicide was later revealed to be something else entirely, thanks to a student who refused to forget the strange question on the last test Park ever gave. NTHE discovery was shocking. Park's body was slumped over the final exam he had been preparing. His blood pooled across the papers. Authorities concluded he had taken his own life, unable to bear the stress. The school closed the classroom and canceled the exam. But Lee Min-jae, a 17-year-old student and one of Park's top pupils, couldn't accept the explanation. Park had been excited about the test, even telling Min-jae, "This one will change everything." Reviewing the last draft of the exam, Min-jae noticed something odd. Question 13 was a logic puzzle that didn't make sense. Its variables didn't add up, and the symbols were unfamiliar. Min-jae took the paper to his uncle, a professor of cryptography, who recognized the symbols as encoded letters. When decoded, the question read, "The room is watching." Curious, Min-jae checked the school's surveillance system, only to discover that the footage from Park's classroom had been erased, but only for a 90-minute window the night of his death. Elsewhere, footage showed 3 administrators, including Vice Principal Choi Sang-woo, entering the building late at night. Min-jae hacked the system's backup server and retrieved fragmented footage. It showed Park confronting Choi in the classroom, waving a folder, yelling, "Something never seen from Park." Choi left, and moments later, 2 other men entered. There was a struggle, and then the screen went black. Terrified, Min-jae leaked the footage online. The public outcry forced police to reopen the case. An autopsy revealed that Park's wound could not have been self-inflicted. Investigators found that Park had discovered cheating rings within the school, where parents of wealthy students had paid Choi for advance access to exams. Park had planned to expose them, and question 13 was his warning. They silenced him before he could act. Choi was arrested, along with several staff. Dongjin's reputation collapsed. The classroom was sealed permanently. Min-jae left Korea, now studying abroad. But in the abandoned hallway, students say you can still hear chalk scratching, writing question 13 over and over. A message no one wanted to read, but someone finally solved. In the quiet suburb of Oakville, Ontario, nestled among neat rows of homes and the comforting predictability of cul-de-sacs and community parks, stood Bellevue Primary School, a cheerful one-story building painted in soft blue and white. Known for its close-knit staff and low student-teacher ratio, Bellevue was the sort of place where everyone knew everyone, where parents waved at each other during morning drop-off and bake sales raised money for playgrounds. In 1998, the school year began like any other, until one January morning, when Ms. Deborah Lang, a second-grade teacher, locked her classroom door at 9 a.m. and refused to let her class out. No recess, no lunch, no bathroom breaks. Parents arrived in panic by afternoon. Police were called. What followed was a standoff that would grip the nation, and when officers finally breached the room, they discovered a scene so surreal and disturbing that many officers would later require counseling. Ms. Lang had not simply lost her mind. She had been executing a plan that no one could have predicted. Deborah Lang, 42, had been teaching at Bellevue for nearly 12 years. She was seen as kind, old-fashioned, and perhaps overly strict, but beloved by students for her elaborate storytelling and seasonal classroom decorations. Colleagues noted she rarely socialized, preferring to spend evenings in her room prepping lessons. Over the winter break, Lang had emailed parents about an exciting immersive learning project where students would live through history. On January 12th, when class began, she told her students they were going on a special journey to 1880, the early days of Canada. She then locked the door, covered the windows, and told the children they were no longer in Oakville, but in a schoolhouse in the past, and they had to obey old rules to stay safe. And as hours passed, children began crying. Some wet themselves. Lang refused to let them leave. She tore the classroom clock from the wall, stuffed paper into the intercom speaker, and burned lesson materials in a small tin for warmth. When the principal knocked, she refused to open the door, saying, quote, "Time has broken. They are my responsibility now." Parents gathered in panic. Police arrived. Through the door, Lang insisted she was protecting the children. Officers heard chanting inside, Lang reading aloud from an old-school manual. She threatened to, quote, "punish time breakers" if police intervened. After 7 hours, police breached the door. Inside, desks were arranged in rows. Children sat rigid, some sobbing, others in a daze. Lang stood at the front, holding a yardstick, her face smeared with ash. The room was lit by candles, and on the blackboard she had written, "Only the obedient will be saved." Lang was arrested and institutionalized, but the story didn't end there. In the weeks that followed, investigators searched her home and found hundreds of handwritten notebooks detailing, quote, temporal corrections and reincarnations of past students. In one, she described a previous life as a schoolmistress in 1880 who had died in a school fire, swearing to complete the lesson in the next life. Lang believed her students were reincarnated children from that fire, and her mission was to teach them until they remembered, and Bellevue closed for 6 months. Many students never returned. Lang remains in psychiatric care, unfit for trial. To this day, parents refuse to speak publicly. But near her old classroom, the wall remains scorched from candle smoke. Beneath it, someone etched, "The lesson is not over." In the sleepy countryside of Wiltshire, England, surrounded by fog-covered fields and stone fences older than the country itself, lay St. Agatha's School for Girls, a modest boarding school with ivy-draped buildings, creaky dormitories, and a faculty as rigid as the ancient walls. In 1985, it housed only 43 students, mostly daughters of diplomats, aristocrats, or ambitious families who believed in discipline over affection. Miss Eleanor Barrington, 56, was a science teacher and housemistress known for her cold precision, sharp features, and unwavering control of her classroom. Her lessons were methodical, her punishments swift. She was respected, feared, but no one suspected she was testing poisons on her own students. Over 2 years, 4 girls died, each officially from natural causes. But one survivor, a girl named Lucy Carrington, would eventually expose Barrington's deadly obsession and the cover-up that let it happen. NTHE's first death came in spring 1984. Harriet Winslow, 13, collapsed in the dormitory, gasping for air. Doctors ruled it an undiagnosed heart defect. 2 months later, Sarah Pennington, 12, was found unconscious at her desk, dead before help arrived. Again, heart failure, they said. Barrington conducted a school memorial, standing somber and proud. But Lucy Carrington, a quiet 11-year-old, noticed something strange. Both girls had lunch alone with Miss Barrington the day before they died, a reward for academic excellence. In October, another girl died, this time vomiting violently in the night. A rumor spread. St. Agatha's was cursed. Lucy kept a journal, documenting patterns. She noticed that Barrington always prepared the reward lunches herself, served in her private quarters. When Lucy was invited for her own reward lunch, she accepted, but secretly hid the food in her pocket. That night, she felt sick anyway. Dizziness, nausea, hallucinations. She realized the tea had been drugged. Terrified, she told Matron Wilkes, the school nurse, who dismissed her as, quote, hysterical. But Wilkes died 3 weeks later, falling down the stairs after drinking tea brought by Barrington. Lucy stole Barrington's private notebook, hidden beneath floorboards in her office. Inside, detailed entries described dose amounts, symptoms observed, and adjustments made. Barrington believed in refining the line between life and death and saw her students as clinical assets. Lucy escaped and contacted her brother, a local solicitor. Police raided the school. Barrington was arrested but declared mentally unfit for trial, institutionalized under heavy sedation. St. Agatha's was closed, its grounds sold. The deaths were ruled a tragedy born of obsession. Lucy never returned to Wiltshire, but years later, in an interview, she said, "She called us her daughters, but in her eyes, we were just the next dose." In the rural town of Ashwood, Kentucky, tucked between rolling hills and aging farmland, the local high school served as both community hub and cultural relic, a place where nothing ever changed, and where families often sent their children to the same classrooms their parents had once sat in. The town was quiet, tightly knit, and proud. But in the fall of 2003, that pride shattered when a creative writing assignment issued by beloved English teacher Mr. David Kellerman led to one student's death, 2 arrests, and a school-wide investigation that revealed Kellerman's twisted manipulation of the very students he claimed to nurture. What began as a lesson on fiction became a real-life crime, and by the time authorities understood the full scope, Kellerman had vanished. NMR. Kellerman, 45, was a charismatic teacher known for intense writing workshops and personalized mentorship. He wore tweed jackets, quoted Shakespeare, and encouraged students to write what others feared to think. His classroom was filled with old books, typewriters, and blackout curtains to focus the imagination, he said. In September, he launched a new assignment, Project Confession. Each student was to invent a crime, write it in first person as if they'd done it, and present it to the class. Make it real, he instructed. Convince us you are guilty. At first, students were excited, then nervous. As the due date approached, one student, Ethan Price, 16, began acting strangely. Friends said he was paranoid, refusing to share his story. On October 3rd, Ethan was found dead in the school library, his body hanging from a rafter. In his pocket, a note read, "It was real. I couldn't carry it anymore." Police ruled it suicide, but when Kellerman handed in the students' assignments, collected the day before, Ethan's essay was missing. The school was thrown into chaos. A week later, two students, James Lott and Kyle Jennings, were arrested after school IT staff discovered surveillance footage of them assaulting Ethan outside school grounds weeks earlier. Ethan's real confession had been verbally delivered to Kellerman, who never told authorities. Instead, Kellerman used Ethan's trauma to inspire deeper writing from the rest of the class, pressing them to, quote, "go further." Confronted by police, Kellerman refused to speak. He was placed on leave but disappeared before his official dismissal. His home was found abandoned, classroom emptied, computer wiped. He left only a note on his desk. Truth is the purest fiction. I simply asked them to find it. Nick Kellerman was never found. Ethan's family sued the school. Ashwood High lost its accreditation. The classroom was converted to storage, but in its darkness, students say the walls still echo with the last assignment. Write your truth and bleed. In the remote outback town of Yarrabrook, population barely over 800, the only school for miles was Yarrabrook Primary, a weather-beaten two-room building surrounded by red dust and endless sky. It was the kind of place where teachers were hard to come by, and when Miss Clara Aldridge arrived in 1994, young, enthusiastic, and eager to bring change, the town welcomed her with open arms. She was polite, well-read, and introduced new teaching methods that initially impressed both students and parents. But over 2 years, strange things began happening at Yarrabrook. Children became withdrawn, odd symbols appeared on the chalkboards, and students began fearing Fridays, when Miss Aldridge held her special reflection time. In October 1996, a 10-year-old boy disappeared, and in the search that followed, authorities uncovered a hidden basement beneath the school, a room Miss Aldridge never reported, and a series of rituals that would horrify the nation. Miss Aldridge taught grades 4 to 6, often mixing classes in the name of unity. She encouraged secretive journaling, assigning students to write confessions, which she kept locked in a cabinet. Fridays were reserved for reflection time, where the class would gather in a circle, lights dimmed, and chant phrases Aldridge provided. She called it the Order of Harmony. Students were forbidden from speaking of it to outsiders. One parent, Marlene West, noticed her daughter, Talia, had begun sleepwalking, muttering, "Balance must be paid." Aldridge dismissed concerns as imagination. Things escalated when Jake Harper, 10, failed to return home. Aldridge claimed he was ill and sent home early, but no one saw him leave. A search began. Police questioned Aldridge, who remained calm, cooperative, and showed her class logs. All neat, all in her handwriting. But the janitor, Owen Yates, told police about an old storm cellar beneath the school, long boarded up. Police broke in. Below the classroom, they found a windowless chamber, walls lined with child-sized chairs, a chalk circle drawn on the floor, and at the center, Jake, unconscious but alive, seated in the circle, eyes glazed. Miss Aldridge had left candles burning and a journal where she recorded ritual progress, listing each student's name and status. Jake was labeled initiated. Aldridge was arrested. Under interrogation, she claimed she was part of the School of Light, a spiritual society that believed in, quote, balancing young souls. She confessed to drugging students, using herbal sedatives to induce clarity during rituals. She believed she was chosen to prepare the next cycle. Psychiatrists declared her delusional. She was institutionalized. Yarrabrook Primary was shut down. Children reported nightmares for months. Jake recovered physically but never spoke of that night. The cellar was filled with concrete. A plaque outside reads, "Balance was paid." Locals whisper that on stormy Fridays, chants can still be heard through the earth. In the wooded outskirts of Eugene, Oregon, where fog clings to the treetops and the air carries the scent of pine and smoke, stood Willow Creek Middle School, an aging building known for its emphasis on the arts. Tucked at the far edge of campus, almost apart from the school itself, was the Art Annex, a converted cabin used for sculpture and painting classes. It was quiet, dimly lit, and for 10 years it belonged solely to Mr. Lionel Graves, the school's enigmatic art teacher, whose eccentric habits and reclusive nature were considered harmless, even charming. He never married, spoke in riddles, and told his students that true art requires sacrifice. In the winter of 1991, that phrase took on chilling meaning. After a fire destroyed the annex, 3 students were missing. Graves was presumed dead, and what remained of his final painting told a story no one could explain, a story of obsession, ritual, and something waiting behind the canvas. NMR. Graves, 54, was known for pushing students beyond traditional technique. He spoke of the old ways of art, using pigments he mixed himself, and often burned incense during class. Some said he was part of a local spiritual group, but no one could confirm it. That December, he began a new project with 6 of his advanced students, a collaborative mural titled Threshold. He locked the annex for weeks, allowing only his chosen students to enter. Others grew uneasy. One boy told his parents Graves had made them chant before painting, while another whispered that Graves had drawn symbols on their hands with red paint. Teachers dismissed it as, quote, artistic immersion. On December 17th, the annex caught fire during school hours. Fire crews arrived, but the building was engulfed, collapsing before it could be entered. Inside, they found no bodies, but did discover the nearly intact mural, somehow spared from the worst of the flames. It depicted a doorway in a forest, with 3 figures kneeling before it, their faces blank. Along the border, in Graves' handwriting, "To enter is to become." 3 students, Lila Torres, Michael Brandt, and Emma Sloan, were never found. Graves' remains were not recovered. Investigators later determined the fire began with accelerants, and the door had been chained from the inside. Parents were left with only ashes and unanswered questions. Then, 2 weeks later, Lila's sketchbook was found in the woods behind the school. Inside, a single drawing, the mural's door, cracked open, with shadows reaching out. NTHE's school annex was never rebuilt. A memorial sculpture was erected on the site, but each year, on December 17th, someone paints a red door on its base, and no one knows who. NNFOR, more real crime stories that shock, disturb, and reveal the darkness behind the everyday. Subscribe now and tell us, which case left you speechless?